afternoon and welcome. Thank you for being here. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Mitzi Pope. I'm an enrolled member of the Muskogee Creek Nation and part of the Human Trafficking Capacity Builder, or the Center for short. The Center is a partner in human trafficking education, healing support services, and resource identification. The Center offers no-cost assistance to tribes and tribal serving organizations with starting, sustaining, or growing their anti-trafficking work. Today's Talking Circle is sponsored by the Center. Missing or murdered Indigenous people, human trafficking, and victimization are difficult topics. As we move through this conversation, if you need support or need to talk with someone, please contact the Strong Hearts Native Helpline. Their information is in the chat. And the National Human Trafficking Hotline is also a resource if you or a loved one experienced or are experiencing human trafficking. All conversations are confidential and anonymous. All right, now I would like to welcome our moderator, Lenny Hayes. So over to you, Lenny.
Thank you, Mitzi. My name is Lenny Hayes, and I'm from the Sisseton, Wahpeton, Oyate of the northeast corner of South Dakota. And I just want to say thank you to the organizers for asking me today to moderate this important conversation that we're going to have. So our discussion today is on supporting families of missing or murdered Indigenous people. The focus will be on services benefiting the MMIP families, financial resources to support these efforts, and the healing impact survivors services can have on MMIP families. We look forward to hearing your questions and our panelists' perspectives. And I am so happy and proud to sit with some amazing women that I know as my friends, my colleagues, my relatives, good people in my life. And so joining me today are three panelists, Agnes Woodward, Rachel Fernandez, and Carolyn DeFord. I invite each of them to say hello and offer a brief introduction. Agnes, let's start with you.
Tansei, good afternoon. It's really a joy to be here, really honored to be here with all these amazing advocates and everyone across Indian country that is doing wonderful work. Thank you for the invite. Thank you to the organizers. And thank you, Lenny, for always inviting us to be part of these conversations. I'm Nehiel Squell. I'm Plains Cree from Kwaktus First Nations, Treaty 4 territories in Saskatchewan, Canada. But I live in Newtown, North Dakota on MHA Nation with my husband and children. They're enrolled members of the 3 affiliated tribes, Fort Berthold Reservation. And I've been there for 18 years now, the majority of the last 18 years. I am a grassroots organizer. I'm an MMIP family member. I, like I said, mother, wife, ribbon skirt artist. And I'm just really honored to be here. I just always like to acknowledge that, I'm a grassroots organizer that was born to grassroots organizers. Both my parents, they are lived experience grassroots organizers. My father is a residential school survivor, and my mother is a 60 scoop survivor. And we have, a relative in our family that went missing and, was murdered. And so all of those experiences have really guided our work, and I've just been really blessed to learn how to be, really mindful of families within this movement and the way that the work is done within this movement to always be family focused. And I'm happy to share as much as I can about that today. Thank you again.
Thank you, Agnes. Rachel, let's have you go next.
So Mauniwiak, Nuiswin Namalkuki, Net Totam Awasa, Netskewiki Middle Village. Hello, everyone. My Menominee name is Namalkuki, which means sturgeon woman. I'm honored to be here with all of you and share this space. I want to give thanks to everyone involved in making this happen. uplifting families and survivor voices is very important to me, being a survivor myself. And I'm hoping for good things to come for everyone. Machwawanan.
Thank you, Rachel. Carolyn.
Hatzlahil, Carolyn DeFord, Seedsta, Spiola, Bobstrud, Tulachud, Tacoma. Good day. My name is Carolyn DeFord. I am Puyallup, Nisqually, and Cowlitz. I currently work and reside in the Tacoma, Washington area, which I'm blessed to be able to be in my ancestral homelands. I'm an MMIWP family member. My mother, Leona LeClaire Kinsey, went missing from La Grande, Oregon, October 25th, 1999. That kind of put me on this journey and in connection with folks who advocated for me, but also kind of organically providing support and emotional support to other families and not even realizing that that was advocacy. So I'm very honored and excited to be here and share this space with everybody today.
Thank you, Carolyn. Again, it's just an honor to sit with all of you today. So again, so to start our discussion, I'd like to ask our panelists a few of my own questions. Following these opening questions, we will shift to your questions. Please enter your questions at any time to the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So Agnes, I'm going to start with you. Would you share a bit about the history of MMIP and discuss how a community member can support their relatives? If you need me to say it again, please let me know.
Yeah, so the movement for justice began at the grassroots level, as most movements for change have. In 1990 in Vancouver, British Columbia, in the downtown east side, there was a group of women that had organized the first Women's Memorial March, and that is held every year on February 14th. And since then, over the last more than 30 years, that march has really grown. You see it across, Turtle Island and various communities on that day. It's a beautiful movement that started. And I don't know where, who, or when, the term MMIW was started or coined. There are, different suggestions on how that came to be. But I do know that as soon as it was, it really impacted communities because of, how much our communities are affected by that. And I know that during, a lot of families that were organizing along the Highway of Tears, it was decided that G should be added to MMIW to acknowledge the age of some of the victims that were either missing or being found along the Highway of Tears. And I mean, some of them were 15 years old, 17 years old, but they were still being treated and talked about like they were, adults that, were responsible for what happened to them in the media and by, law enforcement. And so to acknowledge that innocent relationship, that somebody's baby, that somebody's child, and, that child is still has an innocence, the G was added. And I believe that during the national inquiry into MMIW G2S plus, the 2S was added, 2S plus was added because, our relatives that are Two-Spirit LGBTQ plus community sometimes are like oppressed people inside of an oppressed people. They face a lot of discrimination, not only from mainstream society, but from their own families and communities. And because of that, a lot of the violence that they were facing was not being treated, fairly. And so to acknowledge, those relatives and the way that many may identify, G2S plus was added in Canada. And in recent years, we've seen MMIP, MMIR, the acronym has taken on many different forms. It's changed, and that really just is to include men and boys and all of the above, because our communities can't be unbalanced. And, I think focusing on women Girls and Two-Spirit was about equality, the equality of men and women in our communities, right? It was about empowering our women. And I believe that the reason these movements have become so big and impactful is because our women have been working on their healing for so long, and I know that we're at a time and place where we need to restore that balance. And then the men are asking, where do we fit in? How do we fit in? How do we get involved? And look at the numbers that, there's so many mothers and sisters out there that are, mourning the loss of, a son, or they're searching for a son or a brother or a father. We've heard many, many stories as family members and, as advocates on the importance of including our men and boys. And while there are also, advocates that want to keep it MMIW to focus on women, I understand both sides. But if I was at an event and a mother came up to me and told me the story of her son, there's no way I could ever tell her that she does not belong in this space. Our relatives are sacred regardless of their gender or how they identify, and they should all be included. And I firmly believe that. But over the years, you can see how things have changed and evolved, and how it started at, the grassroots level, where community members were just alarmed at how often their sisters and friends were turning up in the alleys, or going missing, and police and media were just not listening and really dehumanizing their stories. And so that's been really wonderful to see the impact. The only crazy thing about it is, if you think about 1990, where this started, the rate that our loved ones go missing or are murdered has not changed. I know we're going to talk a lot more about, those things, but I just wanted to share that. And as community members, the way that, they can show up for our families, there's so many really simple ways. It could be as simple as, on social media, share the missing person flyers. Show up to vigils, show up to events, show up to the walks, especially if they're planned by families. Because when you have a loved one that is missing and you want people, your community, to care about this person just as much as you do, whether people show up or not, I do believe that it matters, and it sends a message of support, and that can mean the world to a family member that is going through so much already. On days of awareness, community members can always take part, show solidarity. They can wear red, post on social media, they can hang a red dress in their yard, all kinds of things. But I believe that one of the most important things community members can do, especially if community members ever are wanting to, do something for MMIP, plan an event, is to be mindful of the family members while you're planning your event. How are you going to include families in the planning process? How are you going to center families during your event? Because I believe that empowering families during the most difficult times of their life is really important, because we often forget how important that aspect of healing is for our families who continue, to carry the weight of the pain that this movement is about. And so community members can always think about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And even in artwork, if you want to create a logo, if you're invited to join a competition in making a logo, things like that, or you want to make a poster, just be mindful of those things. Like sometimes you'll see imagery of like blood, things that show the violence that our loved ones have experienced. And while we always think it's important to have a shock factor, we have to think about those who have actually been, victims of that violence. Are we trying to re-traumatize them? Are we trying to, remind them of the violence that they've experienced? And I've seen this where, well-known fashion designers, well-intentioned, create something that they believe is going to help raise awareness, and it's a beautiful gesture. But then I've had family members message me and like be in complete crisis mode because they are reminded of what happened to their relative. And like I said, that wasn't intentional, but it happens. And so we have to think, what I'm doing right now, am I helping or am I hurting? those who have actually really experienced this trauma, and so I'm a big advocate for families first, and it's just always thinking about those things. How do we help the families? How do we empower them? How do we center them? And how do we create spaces where they feel safe? How do we show up, showing up for the searches? I was always taught that no matter what it is, do what you can with what you have. And as Native people, sometimes we don't have a lot. Sometimes we have, a hug. Sometimes we have a kind gesture. Sometimes we have $5 out of $20, and we want to share that little bit that we have because we're giving people, we're generous. And that's what, I would just like to end with, is do what you can with what you have. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Agnes, for sharing the history and some insights on how to take action. So my next question is for Carolyn. How can MMIP families find, locate support services?
Thank you, Lenny. That's a wonderful question. And, like Agnes said, this is family-focused work, and every family's needs are going to be different, varying from availability of services and access to services, the location where they're at, the type of missing, what do they need, whether they need emotional support, financial support, boots on the ground, legal, media, there's a lot of variables into what folks can be needing. But finding support, I think one of the biggest ways people are referred to me anyway is word of mouth, community and word of mouth. But Google searching and social media. Social media has a lot of connections to reach a large amount of people, but a lot of our grassroots organizers have a strong presence in social media and a lot of followers. So when it comes to organizing searches, they're able to, reach out to their community and get people donating their time, donating their money, and supporting with that boots on the ground work. But for finding and locating those support services, we've all got victim service organizations or advocacy organizations in our area. We could contact them and ask if they are providing services to missing persons. Could they refer us to anybody who can provide services to support families of missing? Any of our, 72% of our population, of our tribal population, lives in urban areas. So looking at our urban Indian organizations and those kind of community groups can provide a lot of networks, and they may even be able to refer you to somebody within their group that is doing that work, or an organization that they support who is doing work with families. But we've got state level organizations that can help. Some of the task forces have amazing lists of resources, creating toolkits and that kind of thing to help steer families in the right direction and get you started. Our trauma response is all different. Some of us, it's fight, flight, or freeze. Mine 25 years ago was freeze. And then I see other families and their fight mode kicks in, and we all respond different. So what families are going to need is going to be different. But for the most part, we're always going to need some financial support. You have to take time off of work to go search, and you need gas to search, and you need food and possibly hotel rooms if you have to travel to go search. And nobody's paying the rent when that happens if you have to take this time off of work, and childcare, and the financial burden of that often falls on families who are not considered the victim because the missing person is the potential victim. So how we can support families financially, whether that's through fundraisers or t-shirts or donations, or donating to these grassroots organizations who are one-on-one, hands-on with families and with community. Oftentimes those donations are unrestricted, so they can distribute them as needed, and not have to make sure that you're enrolled in a federally recognized tribe, or that you're, whatever these barriers that we often face are. But, there's on a federal level or a national level, there's missing persons organizations like NECMEC, who offers a lot of support to families and forensic investigations, helping to find children online, and NamUs as far as creating posters and outreach and DNA and that kind of thing. But social media has been very productive. There's several groups who've been around for a very long time who are doing social media support, awareness, and outreach. You know, Lost and Missing in Indian Country has been around for a long time, and she's a retired homicide investigator, so she's got a lot of information. MMIWP Families is based out of Seattle and doing a lot of work on the ground in Seattle, but also doing a lot of work supporting families nationally and connecting them with advocates across the country. MMIW USA kind of paved the way here for a lot of the organizers who are reaching out on social media, but we are finding people via social media, whether that's that the missing person themselves is seeing themselves on social media and reaching out, or I've had somebody call me or message me on Facebook and say, this car is in my driveway, you know, or in my parking lot. And they're referring to some children that were abducted, and the car has the same damage, the license plate. You know, we were able to steer them towards law enforcement and contact law enforcement and the investigator ourselves and have that coordinated response where those children were recovered and back home the next morning. So social media is productive. Share those posters. That's important. And like Agnes said, showing up at these vigils and events and supporting family, because it rocks your world. And, you know, for myself, it's still hard to feel those emotions. That loss, the fear, the sadness, the anger, the guilt. This was my mom, you know, it knocked the wind out of me. My world stopped for about 5 years. And what hurt so bad was that to law enforcement, it was a piece of paper. Still feels like it's just a piece of paper. And to my community and people who knew her and my friends, you know, they still, life went on business as usual a month later, 2 weeks later. And, you know, 25 years later, I can have entire weeks where it knocks you down. So supporting and showing up for families, listening, just being there to listen, you know, if you know of support in those areas, in your communities, just offer it. And like Agnes said, whatever you do, you know, we all have a gift. We all have something that we can contribute, whether you have the time to make posters and be, for lack of better words, a keyboard warrior and share those posters everywhere, email those posters, descriptions of cars to tow lots, to transit stations, you know, any of the intersections that are creating vulnerabilities for our people, whether that's homeless outreach, mental health providers, substance use centers, anybody where these intersections are happening that may be able to have contact with people who know them or see them. Just the options are really endless and kind of just limited to our imagination. But it takes commitment from community. One family can't do it all by themselves. One organization can't do it all by themselves.
Thank you, my relative, and thank you for sharing your tears with us. I know how painful that, I can only imagine how painful that is for you, but again, thank you. But I also want to thank you for the work that you've been doing as an advocate, and all of the advocates that are on this call supporting families and survivors in our communities. As a reminder to our participants, please submit your questions for the panelists in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will go through those shortly. My last question is for Rachel. Can you share some ways advocates can support families of MMIP during this difficult journey?
I always believe in listening, sitting with them, listening to their stories, and holding that, honoring that part that they're willing to share with us. I know that there are so many advocates out there that are doing the work, and just to be mindful when you're walking with them in this journey. I think Agnes said this before, you have to ask yourself if what you're going to say, if it's going to be helpful or harmful to them, because every little thing can change the trajectory of their healing journey and what they're going to do, because we see so many things go wrong in the systems that we engage in. And just being mindful of that, walk with them, listen to them, provide platforms for their voices so that they can be uplifted, encourage their healing, and provide resources, or if there's trainings out there, help them, support them when they're speaking their truth to power, because they're going to be engaged in spaces. They're going to be in spaces where their voices need to be heard, and to help prepare them for that, that space, that time. Provide them that space. Don't take their space. There's so many, from what I've experienced is spaces where, there's all these allies that want to come and they want to help you, and they're gung-ho, and they're all for what you're doing, but they end up taking that space away from you and taking it over. And so be mindful of the spaces that you're in, and encourage and uplift families, survivors in those spaces, and provide them that grace, and be mindful of that. I would also, not only for advocates, but for allies, do your research, learn about what you are doing, what you're taking part in, because for those of us that are boots on the ground, that are doing the work, that are always out there, it may sound awful to say it to some, but this is our truth, and we don't have time to sit and educate you on things that you're not doing, you're doing wrong. Our time should be with our families and our survivors, and how we can help them along the way. So I would strongly suggest that you do your research and your education, and do your best in that. One of the ways that we, our grassroots organization, tried to get our state legislative leaders involved is trying to get a task force for Wisconsin, and in doing so, bringing families to testify. So providing those kinds of platforms to testify, to share their stories in order to, push legislation. For us, it was creating that task force. And now we are finding ourselves with another obstacle, because we were trying to get a permanent office for MMIP, MMIR. And, excuse me, and it was voted down yesterday. So, so there's so many obstacles, and so much advocating that we do, not only, state levels, federal levels, local levels, our tribal level. We could, make our own task force. We could do our own laws. We could do, we could start how grassroots start, and start making things for ourselves instead of having to rely on, government. So being a survivor myself, and I just say this because it's part of my story and I'm okay with sharing. But in my 20s, I went missing, and I didn't realize that it was what it was at that time, because I was so deep in my trauma. And so now I've been through my healing, and healing is something that I'll do forever. But I've been through my healing, and I'm trying to be a person that I needed at that time. And I do my best in the advocacy that I do, because there were so many times when I was gone that they all thought that I was just out partying, that's how it started, because I didn't care. I checked out on life. I didn't care. I left, and I was taken across states. And so really coming out of that was hard for me. And then to bury that, or try to bury it for many years, was hard, and it compounded my trauma and my physical and mental health. So, we really need the training with advocates to recognize, signs of all the intersections of this trauma that this gender-based violence is causing us. So, like the addiction, the homelessness, trafficking, domestic violence, sexual violence, the CPS, fostering, there's so many systems that are intersecting with what is happening to us. And if we could just have all those people that are in those systems, if we could have them trained properly to recognize all these signs, all this trauma that is happening, because we know, being in the work, that you don't just come to services and you spill your guts and you tell your story. You have to build trust, and you have to believe in someone, and you have to give that part of yourself to this person that is trying to help you. And that's a hard thing to do after you've been violated, after all this violence has happened to you. So I really want, if any advocates are out there, anybody out there that are in charge, or heading programs or anything like that, please take advantage of all the training that you can, so that we can ensure that we're doing our best to help those that have been traumatized, those that, their relatives have gone missing, those that their relatives have been murdered, those that have endured this gender-based violence over and over, because this has been happening to us since colonization. And it just keeps going and going. And this perpetual violence needs to stop. It needs to stop. And this isn't just an Indigenous issue, it's all of our issue. This is all of us. We need to be hands on deck going forward. And I think that's very important. If you're doing the work, if you're an ally, if you're at federal, state, local, tribal levels, grassroots organizations, they have my heart, because they're boots on the ground. They're there. But we need to come together, because this isn't just our issue. It involves everyone on this planet. And I really hope that everybody that is listening really listens to families and survivors in a good way. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. Such powerful words. And I just want to thank all you ladies for all of your responses. It is, it is heart-wrenching, right? And so just thank you for your work. So I want to mention to all the attendees that all the resource links that you see in the chat today will be emailed later today to everyone with the recording of this conversation. Now let's move on and let's move into the live Q&A and answer your questions. Please continue to submit your questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will get to as many questions as we possibly can today. So let's start with the first question. So I'm gonna open this up to any of you panelists. How do you help MMIP families navigate the news that a missing loved one has been murdered? I'll repeat that again. How do you help MMIP families navigate the news that a missing loved one has been murdered? If any of you would like to share your thoughts. If you feel uncomfortable, please raise your hand and I can move on to another question if you would like.
I was gonna say, I think Carolyn would probably be best to answer that question, but I would just suggest to allow families to show up however it is they need to show up, and to just do what you can to support. Last night, my mother and I hosted a MMIP family talking circle, and it was exclusively just for family members that have a loved one that is missing or has been murdered. And we did have, a young woman show up devastated about the recent disappearance of her sister. And if you just sit and listen to any family that is going through these emotions and things, you will hear the recommendations that you need to move forward as an advocate. You will hear all of the suggestions that, things that we can do to better serve the families. And that's just simply by listening, because they'll tell us what they need. They'll tell us who's not helping, elderly. This girl was trying to have her family searched. Community was not showing up. There was no funding. They couldn't miss work, like Carolyn had said. And she had her father and her elderly uncles trying to go out, and search, and they're not capable, like physically, they weren't capable of doing that. And just, having community members show up to support families in that way. But it was really comforting to watch the way that my mother was able to give her words of comfort, because at one time it was my mom's sister that was missing, and then later was found murdered. And empowering family members, like how my mom has been through all of those emotions, but she's also been moved to really advocate. And I mean, what drives my family to advocate is, like, if you can prevent one family from ever having to experience that, that is what is the push for that. But yeah, like I said, just show up, let them show up as they are, and just try to support them, with medicines, water, and just listening. I'm sure that there's a lot more that can be done that, Carolyn could share, but I just wanted to share that, creating space, for our family members to express what they need, and just really intentionally listening to that.
Thank you, Agnes. Carolyn?
Agnes, you kind of nailed it. What everybody needs is different. And, sometimes, as a lot of us are in this work because of a personal connection, and sometimes I might not show up for folks who their story really resonates with me the way that they would need me. And so knowing that there might be a partner or another advocate who has a gift in that, we've got to be able to kind of wrap around our families. And if we know somebody who can contribute to the healing or support of that family, to not be afraid to reach out or provide referrals or even get help for yourself. But there's such a roller coaster of emotions when that news comes in. Our cultural needs and responses and the way we honor our loved ones and send them on their journey is different. And again, being that 72% or more being urban and away from our own communities, me being in Coast Salish, Coast Salish territory, we still have a huge population of folks from all over the country. And how they're going to honor and remember their loved ones or move through that grieving process is going to be sometimes slightly different or drastically different than our Coast Salish ways. So just one, it's kind of learning from them and being there, listening, taking that uncomfortable space. It hurts to be alone, and yet at the same time, you don't really want to talk, just somebody to be there. You said it, Agnes, everybody's is different, but whatever it is that they need and how they need you to show up for them is the way to be, and my auntie said, if you see it needs done, do it. If they're not eating, take a pot of, some hamburger soup or fry bread, or take something to them. If they're not eating, remind them to eat and drink water, take them some traditional teas. But if you see it needs done, do it. If they need help with the children, offer to take the kids to the park, or to, just play a board game with them, or just something to let the family take care of what they need to take care of for themselves too.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. So this is a question for any of you panelists. In terms of professionals representing or advocating for families of MMIP within the legal system, and knowing that all families have different needs, could you share your general thoughts about how we can be supportive regarding any cultural attitudes and relationships to the criminal justice system? Please let me know if you want me to repeat it. Okay, I'll read it one more time. In terms of professionals representing or advocating for families of MMIP within the legal system, and knowing that all families have different needs, could you share your general thoughts about how we can be supportive regarding any cultural attitudes and relationships to the criminal justice system?
I would say if you're working with families and advocating, representing them, make sure that they have their input, their voice in everything that you're doing. Ask questions, ask as many questions as you can when you are navigating the criminal justice system. There's so many issues when it comes to law enforcement. And this is just me, because I've navigated these systems for so long that now I have relationships with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I have relationship with county and our tribal law enforcement, but really doing your research, because for my community, we are a sovereign in Wisconsin. So we are non-PL 280. So we have our own codes, our own laws, all of that. And so really doing my research and knowing my laws and how that works alongside counties, surrounding counties, with the state and with the feds. So knowing that and always being mindful of what the family wants. And if they don't want you to do something, you don't do it. And if they and if they want you to do something, you try your best to do it, ask questions, and do whatever it takes to get answers. It's very hard at times because not all jurisdictions are mindful of that relationship. Relationships aren't built on trust, unfortunately, with law enforcement. So really supporting the family in what they want, be mindful of their voice in what is happening with them and the case. And if there's anything you can do to help alleviate anything, any obstacle or anything, you know, just keep doing what you're doing, ask those questions, and be sure to walk with that family. That's my take.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I'm trying to think about the question, but you know, I had a conversation last night with one of my good friends, my sister. I call her sister. She is part of a task force. I'm not going to put her name out there or, you know, which task force, but they recently started doing listening sessions, right? And right away I said, are you putting a time limit on each family as they share? And she said, no. I said, good, that's a good start. And I said, is there support for the families? She was like, well, we have, you know, some mental health professionals on site. I said, what about elders? Is there a room with medicines that they can go to? Is it grounded in ceremony? Does it start in ceremony? You know, are these things offered to the families as they give testimony? Because that for many families could be the very first time that they publicly share anything. And if you know what it's like to be at a testimony like that, it's literally like pulling your heart out of your chest and putting it in front of people. And you're wanting them to listen, to care, to take action, to take everything that you are speaking about and put it into recommendations, carry that forward to whether it's, you know, state government level, you know, to advocate on their behalf for the change that they need, for the justice that they're seeking. And so I believe that while that's important, you know, organizations, government, you know, these policies, like all of it's rooted in colonial constructs. And like, we as Indigenous people have our own ways that have helped us through since, you know, beginning of time. And so I believe that anybody who is a part of task forces, anybody that knows that there's going to be a listening session in your community, I would highly encourage you to organize, to make sure that families are taken care of. And like Carolyn said, make sure that there's simple as eating, like you can, you know, come together as community, as advocates, as task force members to make sure that they are cared for through one of the most difficult processes, you know, that they are being a part of, because it takes a lot of courage to come forward and share your story, and creating that space in a culturally sensitive, trauma-informed way is so important, because their stories are secret, you know, and they carry so much love in our stories about, you know, our missing loved ones. And so that's just what I wanted to add to that. You know, like culture is really important at every aspect. And, you know, the government and the organizations that come from the government have not always honored, respected, and upheld that. But as community members, as Indigenous advocates, as Indigenous allies, we have to listen to our community members and the needs, and just being the ones to take that action and make sure that they're taken care of in that way, I think is really important. Thank you.
All right. So just quickly, we have so many questions coming in and we're not able to get to all of them. But what I want to say before we close out is I wanted to ask each of our panelists, what is one thing you would like participants to take away from our conversation today? All right, should we start with Rachel?
Do
Do you want me to repeat it again?
Sure.
Okay. So what is one thing you would like participants to take away from our conversation today?
Getting emotional here. Listen to our families and survivors. Remember our families, remember our relatives. Be helpful, not harmful. And be honored you're in a space when they're sharing. Like Agnes said before, that, you know, it is like putting your heart out there for everyone to see, for everyone to hear. And it's so important that we be mindful of the heartbreak and the trauma that families and survivors had to endure. So if you're in those spaces, please hold that to your heart and be helpful, not harmful.
Mm,
Thank you.
thank you, that's powerful. Agnes?
I did put a link in the chat. It is a toolkit that a lot of family members came together and advocates came together to create. And it has a lot of grassroots advice. It talks about what to do when a loved one goes missing. It covers every aspect that we could possibly think of. Carolyn was a part of it. My family was a part of it. We all have, you know, a piece in that toolkit. But I do believe that it is a really good resource that people don't utilize often enough, but I put the link there. I think advocates all across, you know, the country and every level of advocacy could, you know, really benefit from that. But I just want to end with, you know, like I said, uplift, center, you know, the families, because empowering each other is, you know, a path towards our healing. And I believe healing within our communities is one of the most important tools we have in ending violence, you know, in all forms within our community. And I do believe it starts with, you know, healing. And when we focus the healing on ourselves, we're able to do that healing within our family and impact our community. You know, something my mother has always said is that being Indigenous means that we're stronger. And I was like, kind of had a hard time saying that in front of people because it sounds like we're being like, you know, conceited. But it's true, because Indigenous people, you know, we keep our hearts compassionate, we keep our hearts giving, we, you know, have a level of empathy for each other, even after generations of hardship, you know, even after generations of loss. And like this issue, MMIP, MMIWP, whatever acronym your community uses, it's so complex. It is so complex. There's not going to be a one answer for every question. There may be 20 answers for every one question, because it's so, I mean, there's family on family violence, male on female, female on male, teen on teen, like non-Indigenous, on-Indigenous, it's all across the board. And it's every family member has been treated differently when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to, media, when it comes to their community. And so just trying to always look at each individual story and operate in a way that honors their voice, I think is the most impactful thing that we can do. If you are hosting an event on May 5th and you have not included families from your community to take the moment to speak, or if you haven't included them in the planning stages, I encourage you now to think about how can you do that. And if you're not going to create that space for them to speak, do you have something you can gift to them? Do you have a way to acknowledge them, to acknowledge the pain that they carry? And I've been saying that for years, if people don't do much for May 5th, there's a community member in your community, you could take a care package over to them, simple acts of kindness. It doesn't take a lot from us to be that for others, and I had somebody do that for me once when I was suggesting to other people that's what you should do. They brought me a care kit, and I can't explain how good that made me feel. I wasn't expecting that. I say it all the time, but I was not expecting it. I was brought to tears, the work is really heavy. There's layers and layers to the pain that families carry, because often it's not just the loss of a loved one, whether they're missing or murdered. It's having to experience racism, poverty, violence in their life, and sometimes multiple loss of loved ones within their family. This time of year especially is really heavy because I carry my family's story, and I try, to be supportive to so many family members that come to you because they don't have anywhere else to go. We need our advocates to advocate for all of these things. Our family members are hurting, our family members are struggling, our family members are alone, and we need advocates on every level to help make sure that our communities have the proper investment so that they can create spaces of healing that are accessible to them, so that we can create, prevention for our youth, because the rate that missing and murdered Indigenous people, it hasn't changed. With all of the advocacy, with all of the studies, the research, the numbers we have now, the rate has not changed. What are we going to do? I'm sorry, I can go on and on. I better stop. But I'll leave you with, that. And I just thank you all, for your advocacy, for everything that you do, and for being here today to always try to think about how can we do more? How can we improve? How can we do better?
Thank you. Carolyn.
I just want to echo everything that both Rachel and Agnes said. And I mean, I could repeat it in different words, but you're both so eloquent, and it's an honor to listen and learn and share space and partner with you. One of the things that I think has helped me a lot in advocating for families and bringing allies and other people in community together to do that is leveraging resources. Whatever you do, no matter where you're from, what your race, religion, it doesn't matter who you are, whatever you do, what is your job? What do you do for work? How much contact with the public do you have? Can you put a poster on your desk? Can you put a poster in front of your cash register? Can you put a small stack of business cards with missing persons pictures on your desk, or, at the entryway of your office with all the other cards? Do you work in a hotel where you can look anywhere where you have a database, where you can look and see if these local people are there? Have they been there? We understand HIPAA and confidentiality, and we're not asking you to break that. But if you have contact with those people when they come in, or if you have an opportunity to reach out to them, Ask them if they're safe, ask them if they're okay, ask them, let them know that their parents are, or their family is looking for them. I heard at a conference a couple of years ago from search and rescue teams said that of the folks that they find or that are located, a large portion of them, it was a misunderstanding. It was a lack of communication, or that they were intentionally missing and taking a break, but they didn't know they were missing. And Washington has just rolled out the Missing Indigenous Persons Alert. And a lot of the folks who those alerts are issued for are make contact right away. And they didn't know that their family didn't know where they were, or that it was a big deal that they didn't check in, so just whatever your resources are, if you have put the poster up at a hotel, if you check your databases, if you have contact with people or know people who have contact, there's a lot of ways that we can use the things that we have access to try and make a difference. It's sad that I see people share pictures on social media of pets and car accidents and all this stuff, but when we share a picture of a missing person on our personal page, it might get shared just a couple times, and that's if I'm sharing it on my personal page, generally this is the area, my circle, my geographical area, and my geographical area people aren't sharing it. So just getting, if they were in my community, in our own tribal communities, our home, we would know. But it's kind of like we're speaking to the choir when we're sharing posters. We need to get it outside of our circle. We need to get it to people who might come into contact with them, because we aren't and our circle isn't, or else we wouldn't be looking for them. And understanding like the intersections between domestic violence and human trafficking and the risk with homelessness, and the connection to that with substance use or drug-induced coercion. And that for these families, a lot of times this has been their worst fear for a while. They have known that their loved one is in danger, and they've feared for this for a long time, or they're afraid to come forward because of that stigma associated with homelessness or addiction. And we've got to break that down and stand up for family members. If somebody is saying, well, they look like I won't go into it, they, what they look like on social media, and that if they lived by this lifestyle, they wouldn't be in that situation. Stand up for them. It hurts to read those things about our friends and family and loved ones. And when somebody steps up for you and says something to shut that, to shut it down, that's priceless. There's just so much we can do to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, I just want to say I am so grateful and thankful to sit in this space with you, Rachel, Agnes, and Carolyn. And I have so much honor and respect for all of you, because I have learned from all of you also. So we hope each of you attending gained new knowledge and understanding of all the resources available for supporting survivors of crime. Now, to end our conversation in a good way, I'd like to invite Sandy to join us again and offer our closing.
Can you hear me? I know. Okay, here we go. I was really playing with, I'm sitting at a desk, right, playing with these magnetiles. My grandkids were right over here. I got carried away with the magnetiles. So I promised you I would light another smudge. And because, obviously this was tough for our presenters. And I imagine that there's people out there that, that this affects very personally. You're lucky if you don't have someone in your family that was murdered or is missing. One of my first cousins, so she's like my sister, she was missing, and then she was found murdered in South Dakota. and her name was Monica. And just yesterday, one of my friends, my Sundance friends, asked me. He was watching Cold Case, and asked me if they ever did a cold case show on her, and I said I don't think so. I don't know about it, but anyway, so I miss her all the time. We grew up together. So, but her daughter calls me auntie, and her little grandson calls me unchi. So she's still a part of my family. But I just want to like this final smudge and say, Creator, Kagane Dangmash Kiki Gwendishnakas. I come before you today to ask and to say, Daga, please protect all of the people today that spoke and that hurts, help their hearts, help clear their minds, help them to find even just a tiny bit of peace in this work. Rachel said, there's enough work. There's so much work here for all of us that we can afford to share it with each other and share what's going on. Open our eyes and our hearts to everybody, so we know who needs help and who can we support. I want to ask for special prayers for the three presenters that gave from their heart today, who cried real tears today, and who I know have done some tremendous work. Please watch over them and their families as they travel across the country and actually across continents to do this work to help their families, because we are all related. We are all relatives. Thank you. I want to ask for special prayers too for this organization that sponsored this. This is not easy for them either, and we know that. So from our tribal nations, we thank you for supporting us in this way. I always, we're on our homelands, so it's our responsibility to watch over you too. So that's when I pray for everybody. Doesn't matter what color you are, where you're from, you're all included in this prayer. Thank you, Creator, for everything we have and for this time that we got to spend together today, all my relatives.
Thank you, Auntie Sandy. That was beautiful. And thank you everyone for being here today. We look forward to joining a future Talking Circle webinar. Everyone take care.